Hello everyone, welcome to a new video on the channel. So, this is more of a video that I wanted to make because it's a topic that just really makes me happy. It makes me really happy. It fascinates me beyond belief, and it's just something I really want to talk about. So we're going to make a quick little video about it. So, for those of you who are 90s rock fans in any sort of capacity, you're probably familiar with the band Jane's Addiction. They're one of the most influential alternative rock bands of all time, and without them, you probably wouldn't have most of the alternative rock bands that popped off in the 90s. They fucking founded Lollapalooza, for Christ's sake. And their music is just absolutely fantastic, from their self-titled live record, to their debut, Nothing Shocking, to their sophomore record, Ritual de Lo Habitual. Just that early Jane's Addiction run is absolutely legendary, and some of the best rock music I've ever heard. And in this video specifically, we're going to be taking a look at Ritual de la Habitual. Not the music though, even though it is one of my favorite albums of all time, but we're actually going to be covering something that just recently came out about the album, and it all has to do with the cover art. So Jane's Addiction's pretty notorious for having cover art get, banned and censored and all that. Their debut record, Nothing Shocking, stirred up a lot of controversy in the late 80s when it was released because of the boobies on the cover. And Ritual's cover was no exception. It was almost nearly as controversial, if not more controversial, than the Nothing Shocking cover. Quote, even before the album's release, the band struggled to get Ritual released with the album cover that they wanted. Several chain record stores refused to carry the band's previous effort, Nothing Shocking, due to the depicted nudity on the album cover. Warner Brothers hoped to avoid this with the band's follow-up, however, the band wished to use a cover in the same vein. One of the main reasons Jane's Addiction chose to sign with Warner Brothers Records was due to the artistic freedom that the label said the band would have, yet the label resisted the band's chosen album cover, and in the end, a compromise was reached and two covers would be used. The band was permitted to use the cover that they wanted, a collage featuring of a sculpture created by Perry Farrell and Casey Nicholae. The sculpture can be described as a visual representation of the song 3 Days. Ziola Blue is the central figure in the sculpture with Perry Farrell and Casey Nicholae on either side of her. An alternate version of the album was released without the controversial artwork, primarily for the stores that refused to carry the original artwork, although some stores chose to carry both and gave the consumer a choice in which version to buy. A lot of people don't even know that there's an original album cover, or at least I've seen some people that just don't know it exists, because the censored cover was almost nearly as popular as the original. In fact, if you go on Jane's Addiction's Spotify, the one that's showcased for Ritual on their front page is the censored cover, not the original. And I think it's an honest shame, because Ritual de la Habitual has probably my favorite album cover of all time. Everything about it, from just the sculpture to the actual set pieces and how everything is arranged, it's just an absolutely fantastic piece of art. And it's such a fucking shame that the album cover was basically censored upon arrival. It's insanely iconic, but one thing I've always wondered is where the fuck the sculptures went. You can also take this curiosity back to their first record, Nothing Shocking. I had always wondered about where these sculptures went after the album covers were shot. I always just assumed that they were just lost to time. I do recall one specific picture of Perry around the time the album cover was released, with just him standing in front of the sculpture, and it's a cool different angle that you can really kind of pick up on some details of the sculptures that you might have missed on the original album cover. But besides the cover shot and that one picture, there was no other photos of the sculpture online. I never knew where to find it. I didn't know who owned it. I assumed if it still existed that maybe Perry owned it or the band collectively owned it, but on the janesaddiction.org website, it says, unfortunately, this sculpture was accidentally destroyed in the mid to late 1990s, which is something that I kind of assumed. I mean, by this point, the sculpture would have been at least 34 fucking years old, so I wouldn't doubt that someone vandalized it, or it was just fucking destroyed, or someone got rid of it out of its controversial nature. I don't know. But today, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I came across a post by Eric Avery, who's the bass player for Jane's Addiction. And the caption says, an amazing historical artifact was unearthed today. And the photo is the band members of Jane's Addiction looking down into this bin or this barrel thing or whatever, and inside of it is the Ritual sculpture. And when I saw this, I actually got so fucking excited, I couldn't contain myself. Taking a closer look at the post that Eric made, you can tell that the sculpture is very aged. Looking at the left, Ziola Blue's hand is completely gone. And just her whole body in general, at least her part of the sculpture, it looks very yellowed and hasn't necessarily aged the best. One thing I also find really neat is that you can see some of the set pieces on the side of the sculpture, particularly like some of the fake fruit. I don't know if those are olives or grapes or something. And then that little doll that hangs to the right of the bed on with like the cross on it. But it's really neat that not only are the sculptures included in here, but some of the original set pieces are too. And if you look really closely underneath them, you can actually see that the box spring that they were suspended on the original album cover is also underneath them. I'm not entirely sure if the red blanket is original from the cover or if it's a new one, but nevertheless, it adds to it, it makes it look cooler, it makes it more certain on what you're looking at. And to my absolute delight, that's also not the only photo of the sculpture unveiling that was posted. There was one other photo that was posted by Dan Cleary, who's the bass and guitar tech for Jane's Addiction. And this one is absolutely my favorite picture of this entire thing. It simply shows Perry looking down at the sculpture, and you get a really, really good look at it. Zooming in onto the sculptures of Perry and Casey, you can see these, like, holes in the paper mache, or the whatever it is that they use to make it. I don't know if they're wormholes or if something was like burrowing itself into the sculpture, or maybe it's just age and this whatever it's made of is like flaking away. I wouldn't doubt that either. But still, for the most part, their faces are entirely intact, which is really cool. As for the Ziola sculpture, the face is entirely gone. I'm not entirely sure if this is a result of vandalism, because I have heard in places that the sculpture was vandalized and that they had to repair it. In fact, I actually found a quote from Casey Nickley, who worked on the sculpture and the Nothing Shocking sculpture with Perry, and who's also represented in the fucking sculpture, where she says that the ritual sculpture was vandalized when we were still together. I guess her and Perry were still together, and was repaired and put in storage, and apparently similar things happened to the Nothing Shocking sculpture. If you look in the comments of Dan Cleary's post, he says that the band still owns it, so I guess that means that the band has owned it for a while and just nothing publicly has been said about it. He says it's very safe and hidden in a warehouse, much like the ending scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark. But yeah, this picture is just, it's absolutely fascinating to look at. Like, this is a piece of music history. Ritual de Lo Habitual is one of the most important alternative rock records ever made. And this album cover is just a piece of art that has inspired me so much over the years. I remember being absolutely obsessed with the record when I first heard it and just absolutely listening to nothing else except Ritual for like months and months straight. And the album cover was just such a nice, like, connective visual element to the music. And to see the main visual element of the album cover still around after nearly 35 years, it puts a big smile on my face. The sculpture isn't in the greatest condition, and I guess that leads to my biggest question here, other than the fact that will they ever unveil it again, or will we ever get more photos? But other than that, my biggest question is, will it ever get restored? Because other than Ziola's face being literally completely torn off, I'd assume it's vandalism, the rest of the sculpture is honestly in really decent condition. Under the Perry sculpture's hair, you can see some of the plasters kind of gone and ripped off, and same thing for Casey's shoulder here. And also, I don't know how the bra on that sculpture and the hair overall on all of them would sustain after 30 years. I'm assuming it's somewhat fragile. I'm assuming it could be frail or fragile if it's been just sitting like that for 30-something years. So maybe restoration would harm the sculpture. And according to Casey Nickley, the Nothing Shocking sculpture was also very fragile, and that was a big reason why it got damaged. So maybe the same thing is true with the Ritual sculpture, and the reason why they won't restore it is because it's just so fragile and old. But whatever happens to it, I'm just really happy that the sculpture still exists and is still around, and that we're actually able to see photos of it. Like I said, this is like my favorite album cover of all time, from one of my favorite records ever made, and it's just a really, really cool thing to see, and I just wanted to make a video about it. So yeah, everybody, that's basically the video. I just really wanted to talk about this because it was something that I've basically been obsessed with since the pictures were posted. If you're watching this and you love Jane's Addiction, what's your favorite Jane song? What's your favorite song of Ritual? Me personally, it would have to be 3 Days. I know that's probably everyone's favorite song on the album, but 3 Days just kicks so much fucking ass. I love that song. And second's probably obvious, but I love every single track on the album. It's one of the most important albums to me in my life. And I'm sure it's had an impact on some of you if you're watching this video and you like Jane's. I love Jane's. They're great. I don't know why they didn't get in the fucking Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. That's fucking bullshit, but that's a rant for another day. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Maybe I'll come out with some new ones soon. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah. See you guys later.